Hi everyone, my name is Manal Al-Fayez and you're watching From Scratch. On today's episode of From Scratch, we're covering vegetable stock, a very simple form of a vegetable stock that we're gonna need to make a mushroom risotto. For the ingredients, what we're gonna need are some brown onions, tomatoes, celery, fennel, carrots, leeks, turnips, garlic, some mushroom trimmings, and some ingredients that we're gonna need to make a bouquet garni. A bouquet garni is actually a sachet of herbs, spices, to help steep in the actual vegetable stock. For that, what we're gonna need are some bay leaves, some thyme, parsley stems, whole black pepper, and some cloves. Right after the break, we're gonna start with cooking. To start off, I'm just gonna grab my brown onions and identify where the root and the stem is. You wanna go ahead and chop where the stem is and keep the root intact. Just cut that in half. What you're gonna do is just remove the dry outer layer of the onion. And this is the most efficient way of chopping an onion. What you're gonna try to do is chop your vegetables all equal sizes. So this is exactly what I'm gonna attempt doing. You don't wanna cut them too small just because the onions will be cooked and the rest of the vegetables will be cooked for a long amount of time. So you don't want them to completely disappear into the stock. Gonna cut them out and put them into my bowl right here. So I'm gonna do the same for the rest of the vegetables, attempting to get them all equal in size and thickness as well. So you want them all to cook at the same temperature, same time. I'm gonna do the same for the tomatoes, but I'm not gonna put the tomatoes in the bowl, just because you want to add the tomatoes in at a later stage. You don't want them to cook and wilt as fast as the rest of the vegetables, just because tomatoes cook at a faster rate. And for our celery, it's quite easy. All you're doing is getting them into the same size of the onions. I'm gonna do 2 stalks of celery. Do keep in mind that all of my vegetables have been rinsed and dried thoroughly before starting. And then I'm going in with my fennel, chopping that up. And again, we're going with similar sizes, just so they can all cook at the same rate. So what we're actually doing right now, except for the tomatoes, is something called a mirepoix. Mirepoix is a standard 3 ingredient, let's say, component that is used for a lot of cooking techniques, in my opinion, when it comes down to French cooking. So I'm grabbing the carrot now and chopping that up. So talking about mirepoix, mirepoix is a very standard, let's say, recipe that is used for the basis of many different things. It could be used as a basis of a stock, could be used as a basis of even a soup. So that's exactly what we're doing right now, a mirepoix. Mirepoix consists of onions, celery, and carrots, and that's a very basic mirepoix. The last thing I'm gonna go ahead with doing is chopping up my leeks, all equal size. And then I'm gonna go ahead with our turnips. There is no need to peel your turnips just because it's going anyways in a pot full of different vegetables that are rinsed clean. Just gonna go ahead and put this in a different bowl just because my other bowl is filled. And I'm gonna go ahead and grab the garlic. The garlic is quite simple. I have them peeled already. What I'm only gonna do is give it a light smash to kind of release all those flavors. And then my mushrooms could go in over here as well. And these are mushroom trimmings that have been accumulated after chopping up some mushrooms. A stock is basically something that you could make at the end of the week, where you add in all the trimmings of vegetables and make it into a stock. So the last component I'm actually going to make is the bouquet garni, and this is consisting of piece of leek, one kind of leaf of leek. You're going to take in all of the herbs right here, bunch them up together. So I have my parsley stems, no leaves, just stems. Some thyme in there. Bay leaf, gonna fold that, put it in here. I'm gonna add in a few of the black peppercorns and cloves, and then roll this up, trying to keep everything in as tight as possible. After I roll it up, what I end up with is kind of like a roulade shape. Going to wrap it up with some butcher's twine and tie it off. This is going to be very easy at the end for you to just easily collect it out of the stock and get rid of it. So you don't have to really fish for those ingredients. One more knot so it can stay secure. There you have it. That is your bouquet garni. We're gonna set this aside and we're gonna start with cooking. I'm going to go ahead and grab a large sauce pot, turn on the heat. I would say medium-low heat. We're at number 5 from 10. I'm gonna grab a bit of oil, grease the pan slightly, and wait for it to heat up. Once it starts heating up, I'm going to add in all the chopped vegetables except for the tomatoes. And the reason for that is you don't want those tomatoes to release all of their juices and prevent the vegetables from getting a nice coloration. So my oil is heated, my vegetables are chopped. What I'm gonna go ahead with doing is emptying all those vegetables into my pot, except for the tomatoes. What I am waiting for is for my vegetables to start to turn translucent and for them to be more fragrant. So I have my vegetables sauteing over here. They're just slightly starting to turn translucent. I'm gonna still keep them going, and then I'm gonna add in the tomatoes. So my vegetables are translucent. They are very fragrant at this point. I'm gonna add in the tomatoes and keep on sauteing. So we're on to our very last step. I'm adding in the bouquet garni and our water. And you want to add enough water to kind of cover the vegetables and exceed them by about an inch or so. I'll bring the vegetable stock up to a boil and then bring it down to a simmer and let it simmer for around 2 to 3 hours. Right after that happens, I'm going to pass it through a strainer and it's ready to use for our mushroom risotto. From time to time, what you really want to do is skim the top of the vegetable stock in a bowl with some clean water. And that's just to remove any sort of impurities. And this applies for any form of stock as well. I'm gonna set this aside for around 2 hours and then pass it through a strainer, and then we could get going on our mushroom risotto. So my stock has been simmering for around 2 to 3 hours. What's left to do is pass it through a strainer and actually use it for our mushroom risotto. This is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to pass it away from me, so if there are any splashes, they go away from me and not towards me. So we're just simply passing all the vegetables through the strainer. You don't have to go in with everything. Just make sure that all of that liquid has been passed through the strainer and collected into your pot. So you want to keep the liquid warm just because you're actually going to use it still for the mushroom risotto. So I'm not going to cool it down, but if you were to use your vegetable stock on another day and you want to reserve it in the chiller, what you want to do is rapidly cool it down, either on an ice bath or in flatter containers, and then reserve it in your chiller or freezer. So I'm just gonna put this right in the back while I prepare my station for our mushroom risotto. I'll see you guys after the break. So we're ready to start on components that we're gonna use for our risotto. The first component that we're gonna work on is a brown butter. My favorite thing to add to a risotto is brown butter. So that's very simple to make, but we're actually gonna add a step extra and infuse our brown butter with some rosemary. And that's very simple to make. What we're doing is adding the butter in your pot. And slowly, gently heating that up. The key to a brown butter is constant movement. And the reason for that is if you've made brown butter at home and not moved it around constantly, you'll notice that at the very bottom, all of those brown butter bits have kind of stuck onto the bottom. And to prevent that, all you want to do is constantly move it around. How does brown butter form? Well, butter consists of 3 components, and that's fat, water, and something called casein. Casein is actually the component that's going to brown, and without this browning component, butter can be heated up to a very high temperature. So basically your smoke point of butter, once the casein is removed, which is considered as clarified butter, can be heated up at a very high temperature. So we're gently just melting this down and browning it. So to do so, what you're gonna need is some rosemary, and we're gonna go ahead and put it into the container that we are going to empty out the brown butter into. So just breaking apart the rosemary, kind of like moving it around, releasing all of those oils to kind of give it a head start. Gonna pour this over and be very careful. Your kitchen is gonna smell like heaven. So what you're gonna do is just set this aside, let it cool down, and then you're ready to use it to flavor your risotto. Our brown butter has been sitting on the counter until it reaches room temperature, and now we're ready to actually start with our mushroom risotto. So keep in mind, we also made our vegetable stock from scratch that has been sitting on my stovetop and warming up. Risotto is very easy to make, but it is a lengthy process. So you could always follow the tips that I show you right here, and you'll be able to easily recreate it at home. So I've got a rondo heating up together with the oil. I'm gonna set that to slowly warm up. I've got a small pan right over here that I'm actually gonna use to saute my mushrooms. I've got some shimeji mushrooms over here, which are my favorite mushrooms to use. They pack a lot of flavor in them, specifically with our dried mushrooms that I actually soaked overnight. I've got some arborio rice, which is the rice that you want to use for risotto. Don't swap it out with any type of rice. You always want to use arborio rice. We've got some onions, some parmesan, which we're actually going to use at the end, some diced button mushrooms, some garlic right over here, our brown butter, salt, pepper, as well as some cream if needed. So this is slowly heating up right over here, and I'm also going to heat up the pan over here. The reason why I have this pan is, again, to saute my mushrooms separately, and then we're going to use them to garnish at the end. So what you want to do is you want to start off by sauteing your onions right over here, just until they turn translucent in color. We're going to add in the garlic and the rice, and we're gonna let that rice get coated with all of the oil that we have in the pan. I'm actually gonna add a bit more oil. You want to be a bit generous with the oil, just because it's actually very important in the cooking procedure. So once I ensure that my oil has been heated up, and how could I tell? I move around my pot and the oil moves quite fast. So that's a good sign that my oil is hot. Got this also heating up, so I'm going to add in some oil right over here as well. So once I'm sure that this pot is quite warm, I'm going to add in my diced onions. Going to add in the garlic. And I add in the garlic and I saute it right until it turns quite fragrant. And that's basically a signal for me to add in the next step. I'm gonna add in next is our arborio rice. This rice does not require any rinsing. Actually, you cannot rinse this rice, just because that might jeopardize the actual granules themselves and break them down. You don't want that to happen, and you want all of those starches to stay in the pan itself. So I'm just lightly going over, coating all of those granules with the oil, making sure that each and every granule of rice is fully exposed to the heat. I've got a ladle in my pot that is ready to add in once needed. So what I'm gonna do is slowly and gradually add in the stock. You don't want to submerge all of the granules of rice in stock. All you want to do is introduce some of the water and let it simmer down. Again, we're not drowning all of those granules with the stock. You just want to add in a bit of stock, let it simmer down, and continue this process right until all of those granules are cooked. This is going to take quite some time, so you always want to be attentive, and that's key with a risotto. You always want to be hands-on. So while this happens, I have my pan over here that is completely heated. I'm gonna add in my mushrooms. What I'm gonna do is add just a pinch of salt and move those around. I've got my risotto rice that I'm always watching and moving around with my spatula. You could always remove your spatula from using your spatula at this point and just move around the pan just like so. But I like to go in with my spatula, but that means I'm very careful with the use of my spatula. Again, once you see that the liquid is almost absorbed, you're gonna go in and add one more ladle of stock, and this is gonna keep on going right until your risotto is cooked. My mushrooms have fully absorbed the liquid. I'm just going to turn it off and transfer it to my bowl right here. And I'm actually gonna keep the pan aside when I'm actually ready to cook the rest of my mushrooms. And then with my pan that was used for my button mushrooms, I'm also gonna use again for our soaked and chopped wild mushrooms. So the reason why you want to soak them is because they were dried initially. These dried mushrooms pack a lot of flavor in them. So you really want to actually reserve that liquid as well. You could use it as an addition to your stock. Adding in my mushrooms. Add in a pinch of salt. You always want to season as you go, and that's key. So once my wild mushrooms have been exposed to heat and sauteed, what I'm going to do is actually empty them out right into my pot right here. So you always want to do this gradually. You don't want to start with something that may overcook towards the end. So time yourself, make sure you've got everything prepared beforehand, so it could be very easy for you to do so. We're almost on the very last stages of cooking our risotto. So what we're going to do right now is heat up our pan once again for the last type of mushrooms, which is our shimeji mushrooms. Give those a quick saute, reserve them on the side for garnish. So what you want to do for your shimeji mushrooms is actually leave them aside, let them get a nice char at the bottom. That's going to add a really nice flavor towards the end. With the proper cooking techniques, you actually won't need the use of cream because you'll be able to extract all of those starches from your risotto without adding any cream to make a really nice and creamy risotto. So on the very last stages, what you want to do is bring that brown butter that you made right next to you, your Parmesan cheese, as well as your cream. We're just going to finish off the cooking of the risotto with just a pinch of salt. And we're going to start by adding that brown butter that we made. So brown butter is really gonna add in a lot of nuttiness and a lot of depth and flavor. So I highly recommend to swap out that regular butter and adding in some brown butter instead. I'm gonna add in some Parmesan cheese and reserve some for garnishing. Do keep in mind that Parmesan cheese does pack a lot of salt, so you want to be careful when adding salt and Parmesan together. You want to taste as you go. Just going to add in just a small drizzle of cream to add in more depth of flavor, and not for texture. We're adding it just for flavor. Just gonna let the risotto sit for a while, drink up the last pieces of, let's say, liquid. All right, so again, a properly made risotto should not stay up. It should slowly start to flow. Shouldn't be soupy, and it shouldn't be too tough. So we're just gonna easily plate this onto our plate. Tap the bottom. Garnish with some mushrooms all the way around. A tiny drizzle of that brown butter that we made. Some Parmesan cheese. And the very last thing, which is some flaky salt. And there you have it, mushroom risotto. And there we have it, our vegetable stock made from scratch to make our mushroom risotto. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time on From Scratch.